You know what betrayal sounds like? It's not always shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes, it's laughter behind a half-open kitchen door. Sometimes, it's the silence that falls when they see you standing there, and they still don't stop. That day, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at my husband and my son's wife and said, "Enjoy your moment." My name is Miriam Rose, and I'm 67 years old. I've always believed that strength doesn't have to be loud. That you could raise a family, keep a house running, and survive loss after loss, all without once raising your voice. I was born in Florence, raised in a small village, and I met the love of my life when I was barely 20. Or at least I thought I had. His name was Victor. He had shoulders like a stone wall and a smile that could part any storm. When I first brought him home to meet my parents, my father said, "He walks like a man who always wants to win." I should have listened to that. Victor and I had one son, Samuel. And oh, how I loved that boy. I gave up everything for him. My job at the school, my dream of traveling. So I could be there when he took his first step, when he whispered his first word. I packed his lunches with handwritten notes tucked inside, prayed over his exam results, and spent nights sewing Halloween costumes when money was tight. He was my whole world. Years passed, and as things do, they changed. Samuel married a woman named Eliza. At first I tried, God knows I tried, to love her. She was polite, beautiful, always perfectly dressed, but there was a sharpness behind her smile. A calculation in her eyes. Still, I told myself she was just adjusting. We all adjust, don't we? When Victor and I retired, I suggested we sell the old house and downsize. He surprised me when he said, "Let's give it to Samuel and Eliza. They're starting a family." My heart swelled. I thought, how lucky am I? A family close by. My grandson just a short walk away. I signed the papers without blinking. A gift. From mother to son. We moved into a modest condo across town. Smaller. Quieter. I kept myself busy. Gardening. Baking. Crochet. I'd bring over soup when Eliza had morning sickness, babysit little Theo when they wanted to go out, and sometimes spend the night when they were traveling. I was the grandmother who stayed late to help clean after birthday parties and made sure every Christmas ornament had meaning. I never asked for anything in return. But slowly, the invitations stopped coming. At first it was small. "Oh, Miriam, it's just a couple's dinner." Or, "We didn't want to burden you with too much noise." I smiled. Nodded. Maybe they just need space. Then it turned into, "We thought you were busy." Or worse, no message at all. I remember once, Thanksgiving, 2 years ago. I baked 3 pies from scratch. Pumpkin, apple, and pecan. I wore my best dress. When I arrived, Eliza looked surprised. "Didn't Samuel tell you? We decided to keep it just us and the kids this year." I stood on their front porch, the pies warm in my arms, trying to pretend the cold air didn't sting. Victor said I was overreacting. That I was imagining it. But the truth was, he had started staying at their house more often. Helping out with repairs, he said. Watching the game with Samuel. There were nights I'd call him, and he wouldn't pick up. Mornings when he'd walk in without an apology. Something shifted between us. I could feel it. Then came that day. That unforgettable, unforgivable day. It was Theo's school play, his first one. I was told it was cancelled. Eliza texted me herself, "They've postponed it, Miriam. Next week." But a neighbor at the market, Mrs. Avery, told me, "Didn't I see your grandson on stage last night? He played a tree. Absolutely adorable." My heart dropped. I baked Theo a little box of sugar cookies and decided I'd drop them off. A kind gesture. A grandmother's love. I didn't knock when I got there. I had a spare key. They gave it to me years ago, remember? I thought it would be a nice surprise. I opened the door quietly, walked down the hallway with my box of cookies. And that's when I heard the laughter. Laughter. A soft whisper. Then a giggle. Too familiar, too flirtatious. My hands went cold. The kitchen door was ajar. Just a sliver. Enough to see Eliza, perched on the counter, her legs curled around Victor's waist. His hand cupping her face. Her fingers in his hair. My knees buckled. I leaned against the wall for support, not because I was weak, but because the world tilted. Something inside me cracked, but no sound escaped my lips. They hadn't even noticed me. So engrossed in each other. So comfortable. I took a step forward. The wood creaked under my foot. They froze. Eliza gasped. Victor's eyes met mine. I waited for the excuses. The stammered lies. But none came. So I smiled. Just a soft, almost amused smile. I held out the cookie box like an offering and said, "Well, I suppose you two should enjoy your moment." I wouldn't want to interrupt. Then I turned and walked away. Outside, the air was sharp and cool. The sky pale and bruised. I walked down the street without looking back. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't let the storm take me. Not yet. That night, I made myself tea. Chamomile. I sat by the window with a blanket over my legs and stared at the moon. My mind replayed everything. Every lie, every moment I thought I was paranoid. Every birthday missed. Every phone call ignored. And suddenly it all made sense. The distance. The whispered conversations. The way Eliza always called me dear. Like I was a distant relative, not family. And Victor? He hadn't made love to me in months. Said he was tired. That his back hurt. That he needed space. I gave him everything. 42 years of my life. My youth. My body. My loyalty. I gave Samuel the home I built. The walls I painted. The kitchen I cooked in. The garden I cried in. And what did they give me in return? Nothing but silence, secrets, and shame. But I am not a woman you break without consequences. I poured another cup of tea. And began making a plan. I didn't sleep that night. Not for a second. I watched the minutes tick by on the old wall clock, the one Victor and I bought at the flea market on our 20th anniversary. Tick. Tuck. Every second sounded louder than the last, echoing off the quiet walls of my condo. Each click reminded me that time was moving, and that I had wasted far too much of it being the silent one. You know what people forget about quiet women? We learn to listen. We learn to observe. And when the moment comes, we don't scream. We act. By morning, I had a notebook open on my lap, a pen in hand, and a list titled Everything I Gave. The family home. Signed over 3 years ago. $15,000 for Samuel's business idea. A $12,000 withdrawal for Eliza's fertility treatments, which she claimed were for their last hope at a second child. A car loan co-signed. Groceries, babysitting, birthday gifts, tuition payments for Theo's school. All in the margins of that notebook, marked with the word, love. They had taken advantage of me, slowly, piece by piece, hiding behind the curtain of family. I needed help. Not pity. Not sympathy. Real help. I picked up the phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in months. "Is this Ruth Jacobs?" I said. "Miriam." Her voice cracked like old wood. "My God, it's been ages. You all right?" Ruth wasn't just an old friend. She was my old schoolmate, now a retired family lawyer who'd seen enough betrayal in her years to spot it from a mile away. She had always been sharp, the kind of woman who wore pearls with her sweatpants and called nonsense by its real name. "I need to meet," I said. "Today if you can." She didn't ask questions. Just gave me her address. By lunchtime, I was sitting in her living room, sipping strong coffee with too much sugar. Ruth looked at me for a long time before speaking. "You always were the strong one," she said, leaning forward. But you look like you've been hollowed out. I didn't cry. I told her everything. The house, the money, the lies, the school play, and finally the kitchen kiss. When I said the words out loud, something inside me shifted. It felt like handing off a weight I'd been carrying for years. Ruth listened. She didn't gasp. Didn't judge. You have options, she said. But we need to start gathering evidence. Real, hard facts. And Miriam. Yes. From this moment forward, you act like you know nothing. No reactions. No accusations. Let them think you're still the silent one. Her words lit something in me. A quiet fire. So, I went back to pretending. I let Victor return home 2 days later like nothing had happened. He came in humming like a man untouched by guilt. Set his keys down. Kissed my cheek. I didn't flinch. Eliza says Theo's been asking about you, he said, pouring himself a drink. Maybe you should visit. Oh, I'd love that. I smiled, my voice honeyed and soft. It's been too long. Let them play their game. They didn't know I was already playing mine. Over the next 2 weeks, I did exactly what Ruth told me. I documented everything. I visited the bank and quietly requested copies of transfers I'd made to Samuel's account over the years. I called my old insurance agent and asked whether I was still listed as the co-owner of the house. I wasn't. Victor had helped transfer it entirely under Samuel's name last year while I was visiting my sister in Sicily. He never mentioned it. Not once. I went to the attic and pulled out old photo albums, receipts, papers, every thread I could gather. The walls of my condo turned into a memory board of betrayal, pinned with silent proof. Then Ruth introduced me to someone else. A young woman named Gianna. A private investigator. Polite, discreet, and far too clever for her own good. I'll start with Eliza, Gianna said. She's got skeletons. I can smell them. She was right. Within 5 days, Gianna had returned with photos, emails, voicemails, proof that Eliza had used my funds not for fertility treatment, but for luxury spa weekends and jewelry. Worse, there were transactions linked to Victor's account too. Private hotel stays, gift store receipts. Ruth looked through the file and exhaled sharply. They've built their house with your bricks, Miriam. And now they've locked you out. I sat in silence, staring at the photos. Victor's arm wrapped around Eliza at a boutique wine bar. Eliza smiling, holding a necklace I'd seen once on a magazine cover. A necklace I unknowingly bought. And then, a photo of all 3 of them. At a resort. Theo on one side. Victor in the middle. Eliza on the other. Smiling. Happy. A family. And I was nowhere. Not even a shadow. The next step was the hardest. Confronting my own son. I invited Samuel for lunch. Just him. He arrived with a worried look on his face. Is Dad all right? He asked. I smiled. He's fine. I just wanted to talk to you. We sat in my little kitchen, the one I kept spotless even though I hardly cooked anymore. I served him his favorite, chicken soup with fresh thyme. He smiled like a boy again. Until I laid a thick envelope on the table. What's this? He asked. I leaned forward. Evidence. Of what your wife and my husband have been doing. And how you, my only son, let it happen. His face turned pale. Mom, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, Samuel. I didn't raise you to lie. His lip quivered. I didn't know about the... You signed over the house, Samuel. You let your wife change the deed while I was out of the country. You took the money I gave you for your business and went on vacations. Do you know how I know? I tapped the envelope. Because I looked. Finally. He said nothing. And for the first time, I didn't fill the silence for him. I let him sit in the stew of his choices. After a while, I stood. I'm taking back what's mine. Not just the house. My dignity. My time. You won't see me begging for holidays anymore. I'm not the ghost in the corner of your life, Samuel. I'm your mother. He looked like he might cry. But I didn't comfort him. That time was over. That night, I packed Victor's things. Quietly. Without fuss. I placed them in neat boxes, the clothes I once washed, the cologne I bought for anniversaries, the cufflinks he never thanked me for. When he came home, I pointed to the door. You're leaving. Miriam. I know. About Eliza. About everything. You can both have each other. He tried to argue. Swore it was a mistake. You didn't just cheat on me, I said, voice low and steady. You erased me. But I'm still here. And now, I'm done being erased. He didn't fight me. Maybe because he knew I meant every word. He left. And I stood alone. But I wasn't afraid. Because I had finally, come home to myself. You might think I felt lonely after Victor left. But let me tell you a secret. There is a kind of silence that feels like grief. And another that feels like freedom. For the first time in years, the walls of my little condo breathed with me. There were no more hushed phone calls in the hallway. No, I'll be back later notes. No stares from across the room pretending to be love. There was just me. My breath. My heartbeat. The sound of the kettle boiling. The truth was, I didn't miss Victor. I missed who I thought he was. There's a difference. The morning after I packed him out of my life, I stood by the window with a cup of hot tea. No sugar, no milk, just strong, and I stared at the city below. It felt new. Like I was seeing it not through the eyes of a wife, or a mother or a grandmother, but through the eyes of a woman finally free to think about herself. But freedom, I was learning, didn't mean peace right away. Because the world I had built, the family I had shaped, supported and sacrificed for, still stood on foundations I laid. And they were standing on it as if it was their right. Ruth called that morning. You ready? She asked. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I'm ready. Good. Because we're filing suit this week. My heart thudded. A quiet beat of fear. Do you think I'll win? I think, she said slowly, you'll reclaim exactly what you lost and then some. We started with the house. That beautiful, ivy-wrapped home that held years of my life. The kitchen where I taught Samuel to bake cookies. The garden I planted when I first found out I was pregnant. The living room where Victor kissed my forehead every morning for nearly 2 decades. They'd taken that house and painted over it. Literally. Eliza had replaced the cozy yellow kitchen with sleek, sterile white. Samuel built a studio in the garden where my roses used to grow. My piano, the one Victor gave me for our 30th anniversary, was sold. I hadn't seen the inside of that home in over a year. But now, with Ruth by my side, I stood outside the gates once again. Only this time, I wasn't carrying pies or baby toys or love. I was carrying legal documents. Ownership deeds. Bank transfers. Emails. Ruth rang the bell. It was Eliza who answered. Her face turned pale when she saw me, and even paler when she saw the woman beside me holding a thick file. Miriam, she said carefully. You should have called. I didn't come for tea, I said flatly. I came for the truth. Ruth stepped forward. Mrs. Monroe, my client is here to inform you that legal proceedings are being initiated regarding the unlawful and deceptive transfer of property assets. You and your husband, our son, I interrupted. Eliza and your son, Ruth corrected, have benefited from fraud and manipulation. You'll be hearing from the court. Eliza stared at me like I was a stranger. You're seriously suing your own son? I'm protecting what I built, I said. Something I should have done years ago. The gate buzzed shut behind us, and I walked away without once looking back. In the weeks that followed, the silence from Samuel was deafening. No calls. No messages. Just the occasional noise from Gianna, our investigator, who unearthed even more. Eliza wasn't just manipulative. She was dangerous. Ruth uncovered that she had taken out loans in my name using copies of documents I had given her for Theo's school registration. Credit lines opened. Luxury items bought. Even a wellness retreat in Bali, charged to a card I didn't know existed. I felt sick when I saw the paperwork. But I didn't cry. Ruth leaned over and said, "We'll freeze every account." She won't buy a packet of gum without feeling the cold grip of justice. We also found out Victor had signed over his own small investment account to Eliza as a gift. Probably in exchange for silence. Probably thinking I'd never know. The betrayal layered itself like bricks in a wall I was slowly tearing down. Piece by piece. By the end of the second month, we had enough to not only sue for property theft but also financial fraud. We prepared letters to the credit bureaus. Filed a police report. Launched a civil suit. Eliza's perfect life began to crack like glass. One rainy afternoon, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Samuel. Soaked. Ashen-faced. Holding a crumpled envelope. "Can I come in?" he asked. I didn't move. "Mama, please." Mama. He hadn't called me that in years. Not since before Eliza came into our lives. I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, looking around like it was a foreign country. My little condo was warm, softly lit. Lavender oil in the diffuser. A photo of young Samuel on the mantel. A woman's home. A mother's home. He sat down at the table, his hands shaking. "Why didn't you tell me you were going to destroy us?" he asked. I blinked. "Destroy?" He swallowed. "You're suing us. Publicly. Eliza's losing everything." I sat down across from him. "She took everything first. I'm just taking it back." "She's sorry." I stared. "Is she? Or are you sorry that you're finally facing consequences?" He looked away. I didn't know. I didn't know how deep it went. I leaned forward. "That's the problem. You didn't want to know. I was easier to ignore. Easier to silence. Until I wasn't. I was scared. And I was invisible." He looked up, tears threatening. "Can you forgive me?" I took a breath. "Samuel, I will always love the boy I raised. The one who hugged me after nightmares, who cried when he got his first cut, who asked me to sing even when my voice was tired. That boy has my forgiveness." He looked hopeful. "But the man you've become, he needs to earn it. Starting now." He nodded slowly. "What should I do?" "Tell the truth. Cooperate in court. Divorce Eliza if you must. Rebuild your integrity, brick by brick." He looked shattered. But beneath the ruin, I saw something that gave me hope, the faint glimmer of the son I once knew. As the months passed, the lawsuits advanced. The house? Frozen under litigation. The credit fraud? Flagged and under investigation. Eliza? Now facing multiple charges and public disgrace. Victor sent me a letter. No return address. "I never meant for this to happen," it said. "I still love you." I didn't respond. Love without loyalty is nothing but a well-dressed lie. Instead, I made new choices. I joined a women's group. Widows, survivors, divorcees. We shared stories over soup and stories over wine. I began painting again. Started reading poetry aloud to myself in the mornings. I even adopted a cat named Bocce. And on the first day of spring, I walked past my old home. It was still under court lock. The ivy had grown wild again. A little chaotic. A little free. Like me. The court date was set for April 17th. I circled it on my calendar with a red marker. Not because I was afraid, but because it was the day I was going to speak for the version of myself who stayed silent too long. You see, the thing about betrayal is that it doesn't always come like a storm. Sometimes it's a slow leak, dripping day after day, unnoticed until everything is soaked and rotting. And when you finally see it for what it is, you either drown or rebuild. I had chosen to rebuild. The week before the hearing, I met with Ruth and Gianna again. They were like my war counsel. Ruth, sharp as ever, was going over every document for the third time. Gianna, calm and intuitive, had a new report. She handed it to me gently. "Eliza's been trying to sell jewelry," she said. "The one you bought her. And the gold necklace from Victor." I looked down at the photos. Eliza in a boutique. A forced smile. She looked tired. Cornered. "She'll probably try to settle," Ruth said. "Especially if the prosecutor follows through with charges. But don't accept anything until we see it in writing." I nodded. Let her panic. I'm not rushing for crumbs. Gianna smiled. "You're more than ready for this, Miriam. You're not the same woman who walked into our office 3 months ago." I wasn't. That woman was still tangled in confusion and grief. This one? She had roots under her feet. A spine made of steel. The night before court, I sat alone with a photo album. Victor and I on our wedding day. Samuel as a baby, covered in cake frosting. Christmas mornings. Beach trips. Hospital rooms. Birthday candles. So many years. So many faces. So many versions of me. Smiling, serving, sacrificing. I touched the photos and whispered, "Thank you. But you're not coming with me tomorrow. I have to go alone." Then I made tea, washed my face, and went to bed without tears. The courtroom was cold, modern, and full of people who barely looked up. But I walked in wearing my best navy blue coat, the one with the soft silver buttons and the satin lining that made me feel regal. I had my gray hair tied in a soft chignon. Pearl earrings. My wedding ring? Gone. Victor was there. So was Eliza. They didn't sit together. Samuel arrived last, alone, eyes down. He looked up when he saw me and offered a small, trembling smile. I nodded gently. That was all. The judge called us in. And I sat with Ruth while she opened our case. Fraud. Financial abuse. Deceptive transfer of property. Unauthorized credit use. Eliza's lawyer tried to delay things. Claimed miscommunication and emotional misunderstanding. But Ruth shut it down. Cold. Clear. Precise. And when the judge asked if I had anything to say, I stood. My knees didn't shake. My voice didn't waver. "Your Honor," I said, "I gave my son and his wife a home. I gave them time, care, money, all from a place of love. What they gave me in return was exclusion, deceit, and theft. I am not here for revenge. I am here because what happened to me is happening to women everywhere. Grandmothers, mothers, wives. And we're taught to stay quiet for the sake of family. But sometimes, silence isn't grace. Sometimes, it's erasure. And I refuse to be erased." The courtroom was still. Even the judge blinked twice before nodding. "Thank you, Mrs. Rose." That was the moment I let go of the shame. The idea that standing up for myself was somehow betrayal. No. Betrayal was what they did to me. This was reclamation. 2 weeks later, the ruling came in. Eliza was ordered to repay all misused funds, nearly $89,000. Her credit fraud case was being moved to criminal court. The house was ruled as an unlawfully transferred asset. I was granted partial control of it again, with the option to sell or reclaim it pending Samuel's testimony. As for Victor, the judge had no power to strip him of his personal accounts, but he was cited for unethical behavior in the asset transfer process. His reputation, what little was left, took a hit. But I didn't care about Victor's pride anymore. What mattered was that I had taken back my name, my dignity, my place. One sunny afternoon, Samuel showed up again. This time, with Theo in tow. The boy ran to me, his arms flinging around my waist. Nana! I missed you. I bent down, holding him tight. I missed you too, sweetheart. Samuel stood there, uncertain. I told Eliza, he said, that I want full custody. I'm done pretending. I looked him over. He was tired, thinner, but different. The kind of different that comes after breaking and choosing to heal. I don't expect things to go back, he added. But I'm ready to earn my way back into your life. I nodded. Start with the truth. Always. He wiped his eyes and handed me a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. A real apology. No excuses. Just remorse. And a check. I sold the studio, he said quietly. It was built on your garden. I think it's only right it helps you plant something new. I cried then. Not because I was broken, but because something had finally mended. It's been nearly a year now. I didn't move back into the house. Instead, I sold it. I used part of the money to buy a little cottage on the edge of Florence, with a garden that reminds me of the one I lost. I hired a young artist to paint the walls. I joined a local women's group. We laugh over espresso, share stories over long walks, and remind each other what strength looks like when it's soft but unbreakable. Theo visits me every weekend. We bake. We plant tomatoes. We sing old songs out of tune. As for Victor, I hear he lives alone in a rented apartment. Sometimes guilt is the only companion a man earns. Eliza? I haven't heard a word. Her silence is the apology I never needed. And me? I am not bitter. I'm simply awake. Let me leave you with this. If you are reading this, and you've ever been betrayed by the very people you fed, clothed, and sheltered, if you've ever stayed silent in the name of keeping peace, let me say this. You do not owe your suffering to people who only take. You owe your peace to yourself. Stand. Reclaim. And then, plant new seeds. People often assume that healing means forgetting. It doesn't. Healing means remembering, but choosing to no longer bleed. I wake up now with the sun on my face, not dread in my chest. My little cottage in the hills of Florence is surrounded by olive trees and wild rosemary. The shutters creak gently in the wind, and the birds begin their song before I've even had my tea. It's a quiet life, but not empty. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. I learned that the hard way. The garden is coming alive again. Not the one I left behind, but this one is mine from the very first seed. I planted a new rose bush by the gate. Not because I needed a symbol, but because it reminds me that something can bloom even after it's been uprooted. And that is the life I've chosen to grow now. A life after betrayal, built not in defiance of others but in devotion to myself. Samuel kept his word. Slowly, but with sincerity. He filed for divorce from Eliza. It wasn't clean or easy, she fought back of course. Claimed slander. Insisted she was the real victim. But with the criminal charges and our legal case behind her, her words didn't carry weight anymore. She ended up taking a small settlement and disappearing from town. Part of me thought I'd feel triumphant seeing her fall. But I didn't. I felt sad. Not for her, but for the years I wasted trying to belong to a family she was quietly dismantling. The final court ruling granted me full legal restitution. Heavy checkmark, all misused funds returned. Heavy checkmark, a public correction of my name and credit. Heavy checkmark, and the proceeds from the house, clean and free, now mine. But the most powerful justice was this. I didn't feel ashamed anymore. I didn't shrink when I walked into a room. I didn't apologize for existing. And that, more than any amount of money, was the victory I didn't know I needed. Theo, my grandson, became my little lighthouse in those first few months. Children don't understand betrayal the way adults do. They just know love and absence. And I had been absent, forcibly, for too long. Why weren't you at my play, Nana? he asked me one evening while we made biscotti together in my new kitchen. I knelt beside him, wiping flour from his cheek. Because some grown-ups made mistakes, sweetheart. But I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere again. He nodded like he understood. Maybe he didn't. Not completely. But children know the truth in your tone, even when they don't have the words for it. One warm spring day, Samuel surprised me with something I never expected. He brought an old wooden box. Dusty, scuffed, about the size of a large book. "I found this in the attic," he said, handing it to me. "It belonged to you. I think Eliza tucked it away years ago." I opened it carefully. Inside were dozens of old letters, ones I'd written to Samuel when he was away at college. Little notes I left in his lunchbox as a boy. Doodles. Prayers. Photographs. A lock of baby hair tied with a blue ribbon. And at the very bottom, my old music notebook. My breath caught. It had pages of lullabies and songs I'd written but never shared. Lyrics scribbled in the corners. Finger-marked notes. Victor had once said they were silly. That no one would care to hear an old woman's music. But now, here it was, handed back to me by the son I thought I'd lost. The very thing Eliza had tried to bury. Survived. "Mama," he said softly, "I'm going to help you record them. I already asked a friend with a studio." I looked at him, not as the man who once failed me, but as the boy who had returned. Sometimes forgiveness isn't a moment. It's a slow unfreezing of the heart. I did record those songs. 6 in total. Lullabies, folk tunes, and one I wrote the night Victor left for the last time. I called it The Last Smile. We uploaded them to the internet. Nothing flashy, just a small channel Theo helped create. And wouldn't you know it? People listened. Commented. Some said the songs reminded them of their grandmothers. Others said they played them to help them sleep. I hadn't just rebuilt my life. I had found a new way to share it. Ruth visited one afternoon, standing tall in her red trench coat like she always did. She looked around my garden, smiling. "I've watched a lot of women walk away from bad men, but I haven't seen many plant lavender after." I laughed. "Lavender's stubborn. It grows where others don't." She nodded. "Like you." I hugged her tight. "You saved me, Ruth. Not just legally. You reminded me I'm still worth fighting for." She held my hands. "No, Miriam. You saved yourself. I just handed you the pen." Months turned into a year. And on the 1-year anniversary of the day I walked in on Victor and Eliza, I held a small gathering. Not to mark betrayal, but to celebrate rebirth. I invited friends, old and new. Theo helped hang lights in the trees. Samuel brought fresh bread and a letter he read out loud at the table. "To my mother," he said, voice shaking, "who raised me with patience, who taught me kindness, and who, when I forgot who I was, reminded me through the sheer force of becoming herself again." I cried then. Because not all stories end with revenge. Some end with truth. And truth, when you hold it in your hands, is warm and heavier than you expect. I never remarried. Victor never contacted me again. I kept his old watch though, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder that time reveals everyone. Given enough of it, people show you who they really are. But the most important thing I've learned is this. You are allowed to reclaim yourself. Even if you have to do it in pieces. Even if the people who hurt you once called you family. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up. Who stay. Who tell the truth, even when it's hard. I am Miriam Rose. I am 67 years old. I survived betrayal. And I built something new. Not in spite of it, but because I refused to stay broken. And every morning, when I open the shutters and the wind carries in the scent of rosemary and hope, I remember. I smiled when I caught them. But it wasn't because I was weak. It was because I already knew they couldn't take what was mine forever. I just had to decide I was worth reclaiming. There's a quietness that comes after you've told your story out loud. Not the silence of shame, but the hush of clarity. You stop apologizing. You stop waiting. And you start planting things that bloom just for you. One morning, while pruning the basil near the back gate, I heard the crunch of footsteps on gravel. I looked up and saw a woman, no more than 40, standing just outside the fence. She looked hesitant, her eyes rimmed in red. "Are you Mrs. Rose?" she asked softly. "I am," I replied, brushing soil from my hands. She stepped closer. "I watched your story online. The one about the house, your daughter-in-law. The betrayal. Someone shared your songs with me. I've listened to them every night for weeks now. They remind me of my mother." I smiled. "That's kind of you to say." She pressed her lips together before continuing. "I left an abusive husband last year. He emptied our accounts and made me feel like I was crazy. But after hearing your story, I walked into a lawyer's office." Tears welled in her eyes. "I just wanted to say thank you." I reached over the fence and took her hand. "You don't owe me thanks," I said. "You stood up for yourself. That's your courage. You carry it now." Word of my little story traveled further than I expected. Emails began arriving, from women in Denmark, in India, in Mississippi. All with different names, different betrayals, but the same aching truth. They had been silenced, used, dismissed. And then they stood up. Because one voice can awaken another. I didn't set out to inspire anyone. I only wanted to reclaim myself. But isn't that what healing does? It echoes. Theo and I planted tulips that spring. He dug holes with clumsy enthusiasm, flinging dirt in every direction, and I followed behind him, tucking the bulbs into the earth like secrets waiting for their moment. He asked questions. So many questions about everything. "Nana, why do plants need rest?" I smiled. "So they can grow again, baby. Even plants need winters." He looked thoughtful. "Like people." Exactly like people. That night, I wrote that line down in my journal. Even plants need winters. So do women. We need to go dormant sometimes. Retreat. Let old parts fall away. But not because we're dead. Because we're preparing for something new. Samuel eventually moved into a modest apartment closer to Theo's school. It wasn't flashy. It didn't have Eliza's designer touch. But it was clean, warm, and full of books and drawings. Theo told me, "Dad laughs more now." One Sunday, they both came over with groceries. Samuel handed me a bag with fresh figs, parmesan, and 2 jars of olive oil. "I don't expect you to need help," he said. "But I want to give it now. Because I want to, not because you ask." That one sentence. It undid something in me. Not because I needed help. But because for once, it came freely, not as a transaction. Not as guilt. Just love. Victor did try to reach out one last time. A letter arrived. Handwritten. Tidy, sharp script. "Miriam, I'm sorry. I've had time to think. I made a terrible mistake. I miss the life we had. I miss you. I'd do anything to take it back." He ended it with a poem. One he used to recite when we were young. "I walked beside you in silence, but my shadow followed the wrong road." I read the letter once. Then twice. And I didn't cry. Instead, I stood at the fireplace and slowly, gently, laid it in the flames. Because some things don't need an answer. Some goodbyes are meant to stay closed. Victor had made his choice. And now I had mine. In June, I hosted a gathering at the cottage. I called it the garden dinner. No reason. No occasion. Just a moment to celebrate what had bloomed. The table stretched beneath a canopy of fairy lights. There were fresh cuttings in vases. Tulips, lavender, rosemary, sage. Ruth came, wearing her usual red. Gianna arrived with her wife and a pie. Samuel brought his guitar. Theo ran barefoot, laughter bubbling like a fountain. As the evening sun dipped low, we ate. We told stories. We sang. When the last song ended, I looked around the table and saw something I hadn't felt in years. Belonging. Not forced. Not taken. Not conditional. Just present. Simple. Real. Later that night, I sat on the porch with Ruth, sipping honeyed tea. "You know," she said, "you're one of the strongest women I've ever met." I shook my head, smiling. "I'm not. I just finally stopped pretending I wasn't tired." She chuckled. "That's exactly what strong women say." We sat in silence. Fireflies blinked in the garden. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and the wind carried in the scent of thyme and warm earth. "I still think about it, you know," I said. "That moment in the kitchen. The shack. The stillness." Ruth looked over. "Do you regret anything?" I thought for a long time. "No," I said finally. "I don't regret walking in. I regret waiting so long to walk away. I don't know where Eliza is now. I've heard whispers that she moved to a different city, that she tried to open an online store, that she's dating someone new. I don't care. Not out of cruelty but out of peace. I don't want revenge anymore. I want rest. I want my mornings. My tea. My books. My garden. I earned it, not because I survived what happened, but because I chose to live after it. And so, dear listener, if you are holding pain that has no name, if you are watching people smile with mouths full of lies, if you are wondering whether standing up for yourself is worth the war, let me be your whisper in the wind. It is. It always is. Because one day, you will wake up in a quiet home, and you will smile at the sunlight, and realize you didn't just survive. You rebuilt. You returned. You bloomed. There's a moment after the storm when everything is still. The leaves stop shaking. The sky becomes clean again. And there's a hush, like the world itself is waiting to see what you'll do next. That's how it felt, standing in front of the mirror one quiet morning, brushing my hair, soft gray curls trailing down my shoulders, when I finally saw her. The woman who had been missing. Not the wife. Not the mother. Not the giver or the background figure at family dinners. Just Miriam. Wrinkled, yes. Softer in places, too. But strong. Present. Whole. She looked back at me through the glass, and I smiled. For once, without a trace of sorrow behind my eyes. There had been so many years I thought my role was to be useful. If I wasn't cooking, I was cleaning. If I wasn't cleaning, I was babysitting. If I wasn't babysitting, I was lending. And when I wasn't lending, I was giving. Time. Money. Space. My home. My trust. I had poured myself into everyone like a bottomless cup, until I realized. No one was refilling me. The night I walked in on Victor and Eliza was not the beginning of the betrayal. It was simply the moment the truth stopped hiding. They weren't ashamed. They weren't sorry. Because they thought I wouldn't do anything. They were wrong. After the garden dinner, I began receiving invitations to speak. Local women's circles, book clubs, even a community center for widows. At first, I was hesitant. "I'm not a speaker," I told Ruth. "You're not," she replied. "You're a storyteller. And we need more of those." So I said yes. The first time I stood in front of a room full of women, my voice trembled. My hands felt cold. I thought, who am I to tell anyone what to do with their life? But then I looked around. I saw women with tired eyes. Women with silent bruises. Women clutching notebooks not because they wanted to write, but because they were trying to remember who they used to be. And I knew exactly who I was. "I'm not here because I was betrayed," I began. "I'm here because I refuse to let betrayal be the last chapter." That day, a woman came up to me after and said, I've been sleeping in my car for 2 nights. I left yesterday. I had no idea what to do next. Until I heard your story. I hugged her. Not because I had answers, but because I had been her, lost, scared, and unsure if I had the right to ask for more. The recordings of my songs, the ones Samuel helped me create, reached 100,000 plays by autumn. I wasn't chasing numbers. I was chasing connection. And somehow, strangers halfway across the world were singing lullabies I wrote while grieving the loss of a marriage. Funny, isn't it? How art grows from the ashes of pain. Samuel even suggested a local event, Songs and Stories with Nana Miriam. I laughed at the name at first. But it stuck. We hosted it at the community library. A warm room with fairy lights strung from the ceiling and mismatched chairs that made the space feel like someone's living room. Theo helped decorate. Ruth brought cake. Gianna recorded it for my new YouTube channel. Yes, I had one now. Imagine that. When I walked on stage and saw those faces, young, old, bruised, bright, I felt something swell in me. I wasn't just telling my story anymore. I was telling our story. Because betrayal doesn't discriminate. But neither does courage. One afternoon in October, I returned to the old neighborhood. Not the house. I had no interest in ghosts. But the bakery down the street, where I once bought Samuel his favorite lemon cookies after school. The same bakery Eliza once said was too rustic for her taste. It hadn't changed. Same dusty windows. Same bell above the door. I stepped inside and ordered 2 cookies. One for now, I told the girl behind the counter. And one for the girl I used to be. The one who thought love meant silence. I sat by the window and watched children walk home from school. Laughter. Backpacks. Running feet. And in that moment, I didn't feel regret. I felt reverence. For the woman I had become. Not in spite of what happened, but because of how I rose. Victor sent a final message months later. A voicemail. His voice raspier than I remembered. I lost everything, Miriam, he said. Not because of what I did, but because I never believed you'd leave. That was the last I heard from him. And I didn't call back. Some doors, once closed, must stay that way. Not out of anger, but to protect the peace you finally built. This part of my life, this after, has surprised me the most. I've taken up painting again. Not just flowers, but faces. My own sometimes. I started swimming at the community center. My knees complain, but my heart sings. I even joined a book club filled with sharp, hilarious women who call themselves the late bloomers. We drink cheap wine, read poetry, and laugh about things we once cried over. Isn't that healing? To laugh where you once wept. To sing where you were once silenced. To sit in a garden not built by anyone else's hands, but your own. The other day, Theo and I were walking back from the market. He asked, Nana, do you think people can really change? I paused. Yes, I do. But only when they want to. He nodded thoughtfully. You changed. That made me smile. I didn't change, my love. I just came back to who I really was. I will never again shrink to make someone else comfortable. I will never again hand over my peace to people who confuse love with control. And I will never again let betrayal make me question my worth. I've stood in the ruins. And I've planted something new. Stronger. Wilder. And rooted in the truth. Because the truth is, you don't have to beg for belonging. You build it. From scratch. With trembling hands, and a spine made of lessons. And one day, you look around, and you realize, you didn't just survive the fire. You became the flame. The sun was already low when I unlocked my front gate that evening. Gold light pouring across the tiles, the air carrying a soft chill. Autumn in Florence always smells like wood smoke and sweet olives. I stood on my little porch, basket of lemons in my hand, and breathed it in. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. No sudden phone call. No whispered betrayal. No unspoken guilt in the kitchen corner. Just air. And peace. It had been over a year since I said those 5 quiet words that changed everything. Enjoy your moment. And my God, what a storm that moment uncovered. I used to think healing was like building a new wall. Clean, even structured. But it's not. Healing is like planting wildflowers in the ashes. Some bloom early. Others take time. And some never sprout at all. But the field still becomes beautiful again. That field was now my life. A few weeks before my birthday, Samuel invited me for dinner at his new apartment. Just the 3 of us. Him, Theo, and me. It was small, nothing fancy, but warm. Candles flickered on the windowsill. The scent of garlic and tomatoes filled the air. Theo had drawn a card. Happy birthday, Nana. You're my favorite human being. There was a stick figure with gray hair and a cape. I laughed until my cheeks hurt. Samuel served me my favorite, spinach cannelloni and crusty bread with olive oil. I remembered, he said shyly. I never thought you forgot, I replied gently. I just thought you stopped caring. His eyes softened. I didn't know how much I hurt you, until I saw what it looked like from the outside. Watching you stand in court, it was like seeing a mountain grow legs and walk into the storm. I smiled, a little sad. That mountain was made of every time I stayed quiet, Samuel. Every dinner I wasn't invited to. Every question I didn't ask. Every time I handed over pieces of myself thinking it was love. He reached across the table and held my hand. I promise, I won't let it happen again. I won't be part of that silence. Sometimes apologies aren't about saying sorry. They're about changing the story moving forward. And in that small room, between 2 plates of pasta and a child who still believed in superheroes, a new story began. Ruth joined me the next morning for a walk through the vineyard trails behind the cottage. She still wore red, always red, and still carried herself like she could sue the wind into submission. But she was softer now too. Laughing more. Writing a book, even. As we passed rows of ripened vines, she turned to me. Do you ever miss it? Miss what? I asked. The life before. I thought for a long moment. I miss the idea of it, I said. The illusion. The comfort of pretending everything was fine. But I don't miss the shrinking. The self-erasure. The way I lived like a guest in my own home. She nodded. That's what I thought you'd say. I looked at her, really looked at her. Thank you, Ruth. For helping me remember who I was. For fighting when I didn't know how to hold the sword yet. She placed a hand on my shoulder. You always had the sword. I just pointed you toward the right battle. Gianna, our investigator, now a close friend, surprised me at my birthday with a photo album she had assembled herself. Evidence of a life well lived, she said with a grin. Inside were pictures of me speaking at women's shelters. Theo and me in the garden. A newspaper clipping about my music group. Emails from women around the world who had written in after hearing my story. And at the very end, a single photo I'd never seen. Me on the courtroom steps, standing tall in my navy coat, hair pulled back, papers in hand, eyes steady. Gianna had captioned it. She didn't flinch. I placed that photo on my mantle. Not out of pride. But to remind myself that I didn't just go through something. I grew through it. Victor passed away quietly that winter. A heart attack. Alone. I was told by a mutual acquaintance, someone who'd seen him sitting often on a park bench near the old cathedral. He never remarried. Never reached out again. Never saw Theo again. I lit a candle for him. Not out of love. But because I wanted to close the story with dignity. Letting go isn't forgetting. It's freeing the part of you still tied to a sinking ship. I had already sailed. Eliza, I've heard, remarried someone in another country. She no longer uses our family name. I'm not angry anymore. I hope she finds the peace she tried to steal from others. But if she doesn't, I hope she remembers me, not with bitterness, but with the understanding that women like me don't stay buried. We bloom, even when the soil is poisoned. Theo asked me recently, Nana, will you live to be 100? I laughed. Only if I can still sing and walk barefoot through the rosemary bushes. He grinned. Promise. I promise I'll always live as long as love does. He didn't quite understand, but someday he will. Someday he'll know what it means to rise, to reclaim, to root. And if I've done anything right, it will be this. He'll remember a woman who smiled at betrayal, stood up from silence, and made the wind listen when she finally spoke. So if you're still listening, still wondering if it's too late, let me be your proof. It's not. It's never too late to take back your story, to plant new roots, to become your own safe place. The day I caught them, I thought my world ended. But it didn't. That day was the door. And when it slammed shut, I built a new one. And this time, I left it open. Only for the people who truly see me.